Separation of ownership and control is the core principle in modern corporate governance. The owners of a business don't manage the business by themselves. Let me illustrate this principle regarding the separation of ownership and control in different contexts. For small companies and proprietary companies, the business owners always run the business or appoint their family members or someone they can trust to run the business. The owners can have significant influence on the companies, for example, on the direction of the business. But of course, they don't give every detailed instruction or wish, like a shadow director. In this context, real actual separation of ownership and control is rare. For listed companies, only in a limited number of richest common law countries, like the United States and the UK, is ownership and control of large public companies generally separated. For such companies, there are so many shareholders and none of them has a controlling interest. However, please note, in such large companies, important institutional shareholders, like investment trusts and pension funds, are very powerful. They can exert pressure on the management to run the company in a certain way. In such listed companies with diverse ownership, the key corporate governance problem is between the shareholders and management. That is, how to make the management accountable to shareholders. Globally, the listed companies in most nations are controlled by controlling shareholders. The controlling shareholders are always actively involved in management. Directors are appointed by shareholders. So if you have a large number of shares, you have a say on such appointments. Then you can have influence on these directors. Therefore, controlling shareholders indirectly control the companies. Most of listed companies around the world are controlled by wealthy families. In Asia, there are a lot of listed companies controlled by the government as well. The controlling shareholders are able to make substantial private gains at the cost of minority shareholders. Therefore, for the listed companies with concentrated ownership and control, the key corporate governance problem is between the controlling shareholders and minority shareholders. The major concern is how to prevent the controlling shareholders from expropriating the company, from gaining private gains at the cost of minority shareholders. For example, the controlling shareholders may have unfair trading with the company. Okay, let me summarize. For small companies, actual separation of ownership and control are rare because the owners also run the business. In most nations, the listed companies generally are controlled indirectly by the controlling shareholders. Only in some of the richest common law countries are the ownership and control of large listed companies generally separated. In different types of companies, the core problems of corporate governance are different. The ownership structures of listed companies in Australia are relatively concentrated. Based on data in 1998, research found from 240 sample listed companies, 77% had a non-institutional investor with a shareholding of greater than 5%. 72% had a non-institutional investor with at least a 10% shareholding. 52% had a non-institutional investor with at least a 20% shareholding. and 16% had a non-institutional investor with an absolute controlling shareholding. That is, a shareholding of greater than 50%. That's absolute control. In companies with a large shareholder controlling, for example, 20% of the total shares, we don't expect a real separation of ownership and control. If you have a large proportion of shares in a company, you will pay special attention to its management. You also have the power to appoint someone to the board of the company to represent your interest. But by law, the separation of ownership and control is strict. Even for owners who run a business by themselves, their positions as a shareholder and as a director or manager is different. Ownership and control are separated by law. Company law focuses on legal separation rather than actual separation. The business of a company is to be managed by or under the direction of the directors. The management has extremely broad power. They exercise all the powers except those exclusively exercised by the shareholders. Shareholders cannot override the directors' management or involve themselves in the management of their companies. It's also improper for the shareholders to propose a resolution and tell directors how they should exercise their management powers. Therefore, by law, the directors can even change the direction of business and even sell the business. It looks unreasonable, right? You are my agent. You manage my business for me, but you sell it without my permission. But this is the law, the separation of ownership and control. But for listed companies, some activities need shareholders' approval, such as significant change to the nature or scale of its activities, and significant change involving the disposing of the company's main undertaking. This chart provides a very good illustration of the functions of the board. It can be interpreted from internal and external short-term and long-term perspectives. I will not give a detailed introduction here. For shareholders, their control of the board depends on their rights of appointing and removing the directors. I will not introduce the powers of shareholders here in detail, because this is not the section on directors, it's the section on shareholders. Directors' meetings are less heavily regulated than general meetings, so the boards to some extent can set their own internal rules. Therefore, rules governing board meetings can be set out in replaceable rules or the Constitution, or to be determined by the board itself. But such rules or procedures must be fair because they will affect the rights of the shareholders, directors, and the company. However, there are some specific legal requirements for directors' meetings. If the directors meet informally and have a discussion, that will not amount to an effective directors' meeting. However, if the directors know and agree that such an occasion is a meeting, then that will amount to an effective directors' meeting. When having a meeting, The directors don't have to be physically present at the meeting. Instead, they can use facilities such as teleconferencing or video conferencing to have a meeting. In such a context, for the duration of the meeting, not just some sections of a meeting, each participating director must be able to hear and be heard by every other participating director. At the same time, for any document that is tabled or discussed, each participating director must be able to see the contents. If a majority of the directors entitled to vote approve a resolution, the resolution must be passed. A board resolution is decided by a majority of the directors entitled to vote. Some directors may have a conflict of interest on some resolutions. Therefore, they will not vote on such resolutions. If necessary, the chair has a casting vote in addition to his or her vote in the capacity of director. For example, if there are in total 8 directors entitled to vote, including the chair, and if 4 directors vote for the resolution and 4 directors vote against the resolution, then the chair has 1 more vote, the casting vote. In practice, there may be some statements in the board meeting such as, "I think we all agree with this resolution." Such statements are dangerous in terms of the legitimacy, unless they are supplemented by appropriate formality. If the directors don't have a meeting, they also pass a circulating resolution. If they don't have a meeting, they can also pass a circulating resolution. This means that if all the directors entitled to vote on the resolution sign a document, and in the document there is a statement that they are in favor of the resolution set out in the document, then when the last director signs the document, the resolution is passed. If the wording of the resolution and statement are identical in each copy, the company can use separate documents for signing. For a proprietary company with a single director, the single director can pass a resolution by recording and signing the record.